Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Freddy or Not, where my name is Freddy and I'm ready to dive into today's topic, which is mutagen. Across the numerous iterations of the TMNT, we've seen hundreds of people get mutated, but throughout it all, only one thing has remained consistent: the fact that it makes absolutely no sense. How many times have we seen the outcome of one mutation not follow the rules established by the others, to the point that we just give up on trying to make sense of it? But I'm here to tell you, what if that wasn't the case? What if there was actually a rhyme and reason to this madness? So like and subscribe, because today I'm going over everything we've learned about mutagen through all these different series, and by the end, I'll not only explain how it works, but also why. Starting off, it's important to establish that mutagen is not the only way to get mutated. Obviously, you can get mutated in other ways like radiation or experimentation, but today we're really just going to be focusing on mutagen, okay? So first things first, where does mutagen come from? In the Michael Bay movies, it was created when Sachs Industries tried to create a cure-all using something from outer space. In the Mirage comics, the mutagen was created by the Utroms on accident. The RPG goes into a little bit of detail about this, calling the mutagen a mutagenic microbial agent, which was actually just a canister of waste material that was created as a byproduct from an experiment trying to create organic circuitry. And the original film series describes it as an unknown mixture of discarded chemicals which was accidentally exposed to a series of radiated waves, resulting in the creation of the ooze and its remarkable but dangerous mutagenic properties. In the 2012 shows, it's been stated that the mutagen was just a natural byproduct of these massive worm-like creatures from Dimension X known as the Crathathrogons. Casey was right, bro. They should just call these things the big worms. In the IDW comics, the substance known as the ooze is a green liquid that originates from the planet Utromenon. This ooze has life-giving or healing properties, and when ingested, it can cause a person's body to change back into its peak condition. This even includes temporary reversal of the aging process. So, StockGen Labs, while trying to create a super soldier serum, used this ooze to create the mutagen because the ooze was really the only way they would survive the transformation. In short, the mutagen seems to be an irradiated mixture of chemicals that almost always originates from outer space but can be created here on Earth. And some of the chemicals in the mutagen that we know for sure are nitrinoline, taxon 9, flauchist, and bindex 3. But I doubt these really exist. With that established, let's cover how the mutagen works. Starting with the basics, the mutagen obviously affects your DNA, with it being established that it permanently alters your genes. For instance, Carter, when he was cured of his mutation, was still able to transform because, quote, the ray neutralized the mutagen, but your genes have been permanently altered. But in spite of this, it mainly seems to be stored in your blood, as shown when Bloodsucker mutated after sucking Raphael's blood, while Raph demutated, as well as showing that a blood transfer was enough to mutate Janika. We also note that the mutagen has regenerative qualities. In the IDW comics, a mutant who loses their smaller body parts can regrow them after a while, with an example of this being that Leatherhead states he's regrown fingers before. As stated before, in the Michael Bay movies, the mutagen is capable of stimulating self-repair on a cellular level, since it was intended to be a cure-all. And finally, in Urban Legends, which is debatably canon to the Mirage comics, the Turtles are shown regrowing body parts. As for the mutagen's effects, in the original comics, all we really saw the mutagen do is cause any creature that's exposed to it to grow in size, strength, and intellectual capability. But, as we've seen in later iterations, what's actually happening is that the animals are becoming more human-like. We would also later see that this can also cause humans to become more animal-like. And it isn't just limited to humans or animals. It can also mutate with plants, as shown when Harold was holding a corpse flower and mutated into that same corpse flower. And this also works on objects in general, as seen with like the cockroach Terminator, or Muckman mutating into garbage. Now, according to Rise of the TMNT, the ooze is supposed to combine DNA, not absorb the source organism, and this is important because typically people view it as like one becoming part of the other, but it's a combination. A good example of this is how people typically view Bebop and Rocksteady as just gaining animal traits and absorbing the animals that mutated them, but technically, Bebop and Rocksteady are a combination of the animal and the human, which is an important distinction. This likely also explains why Bebop and Rocksteady have memories belonging to the animals, even though they were originally human, with the Archie comic versions of them even stating, "We were Rhino and Warthog, we were also men, our bodies were human, then our souls became animal, because of the mutagen. Now our bodies and memories are both, we are animal men." This combining of DNA also tracks with what we've seen with the Shredder clones fusing into the Mega Shredder during the 2012 show. In the 1987 show, we learned that in instances where there's no second lifeform presence, it can cause them to transform into a hybrid of their original species and whatever creature they've been most recently in contact with. This likely also explains why the turtles don't have Splinter's memories, because they were mutated with Splinter's DNA, but they weren't combined with Splinter. And in Rise, we learned that this contact can include animal byproducts. Like meat sweats being around like meat products and turning into meat sweats, like there was no animal there, you know what I'm saying? The 2012 show also makes it clear that the mutagen works a little differently if you ingest it. As in this situation, the mutagen causes one to mutate into the last thing ingested before the mutagen. For instance, Antonio mutated into Pizza Face because pizza was the last thing he ate, and Ice Cream Kitty was a result of a cat ingesting a mix of mutagen and ice cream. The only known exception to this are the squirrelnoids, who they just eat the mutagen and it just makes them monstrous. But maybe they hadn't eaten recently, you know, who knows. As for how intelligence is affected, in general, animals affected with the mutagen typically become more intelligent, and humans will typically have their intelligence unaffected.
The mutation didn't up their IQs any.
But strangely, the mutagen can cause some subjects to lose their intelligence in rare cases, like Kirby O'Neill in the 2012 show. The IDW comics clarify that intelligence is likely, but not a certainty, which is why in the IDW comics they actually create a psychotropic compound to guarantee intelligence. The opposite of this is also technically true, as in the Secret of the Ooze movie, the professor tampered with the formula to make Razar and Toka dumber. And speaking of the power of the mind, the mutagen can cause you to gain superpowers, like telepathy or telekinesis. The best example of this that I can think of is probably Krang Prime. Right. Finally, there's a chance that humans can irradiate those around them, as in The Last Ronin, Casey was born a mutant due to her parents being irradiated from hanging around the turtles. But who knows, maybe this was just contact with mutagen in general, not the turtles, who knows. And in the After the Bomb RPG guide, it states that humans have a 35% chance of being born with mutant abilities, so maybe that's a result of proximity for the mutants, but I'm gonna go on a limb and probably say it's just linger effects from the nuclear bombs. But that's all the general stuff about mutagen, so now let's get into the specifics of how it all works. The way that mutagen is shown to work on animals is that application to an ordinary animal results in a mutated anthropomorphic body, but its non-sapience can remain, as shown with like the magpie that was mutated in Rise, right? Application to an ordinary animal combined with human DNA results in an anthropomorphic body and, intelligence. But in some rare cases, when an animal hasn't come in contact with a human recently, the exposure to mutagen can still cause them to develop human-like intelligence and an anthropomorphic mutation, like the punk frogs from the 2012 show or Piebald from the Rise, Application to ordinary animals exposed to a human-born mutant will result in a non-sentient hybrid creature that is non-anthropomorphic. I know this is a very specific case, but Repo Mantis's cat, Miss Nubbins, was turned into this in Rise. It was turned into a giant mantis. And in the TMNT RPG guide, they go into the specifics of the forms a mutation can take. Like they state, the mutation of an animal can range. It can look like a normal member of their species, but have like super intelligence or psionics. And on the other end of the spectrum, there could be an animal that's so completely human that there's only a few small physical and mental quirks that identify it as different from an average person. Or, you could also even have the possibility that the creature just exaggerates its animal characteristics away from a human direction. They even give a system for clarifying how human traits are determined. There are basically 4 human traits: hands, speech, upright bipedal stance, and looks. And in each category, the mutant can end up with either none, partial, or full. So, you can have like partial hands, full hands, you get the idea. Now, animals also have natural powers, so depending on the type of animals, you get a power like night vision or flight, but these are lost when mutated. However, they can be reacquired by spending bioenergy points. What are bioenergy points, you might be asking? Well, it's explained each kind of animal has a particular amount of bioenergy, which reflects exactly how much it can change when it is mutated. So where the bioenergy is spent reflects which traits and powers the animal will end up with. An easy way to think of this is like it's money and you're buying upgrades in a video game. For example, you can spend bioenergy points to keep the power of flight, for instance, or get the ability to speak or to grow larger, stuff like that. And the variation in mutation comes down to which traits were focused on during the mutation, as well as the differences in bioenergy inherent in animals. This explains why similar animals look different after going through the same process. Like Slash looks different than the other turtles, for instance. They also clarify that bioenergy isn't directly related to the size or power of the animal, because it's actually the opposite. Smaller animals actually have more bioenergy because they typically need more changes. For example, they state that animals undergoing transmutation into intelligence are probably going to have to change in size as well. Like the smallest animals, we're either going to have to grow or they're going to have to suffer mental penalties due to their small size. Like the turtles are way bigger than regular turtles, right? Or a good example of an animal that became more intelligent and didn't grow is Sir Cluckington. He became super smart, but he didn't grow, and well, now look at him, you know what I'm saying? And on the other end of the spectrum, very large creatures will have to sacrifice some of their natural size and strength in order to gain human features. An easy example of this is like, look at the size of a triceratops versus the size of a triceratron, you know what I'm saying? Finally, it's clarified that if they had high physical strength already, then a mutation can give them super strength. And on top of that, if they already had high mental endurance, they can use their bioenergy to get psionic powers. So, with all this stated, how does it work on humans? Again, depending on what their physical strength was, they can get super strength, which explains why Shredder became Super Shredder. And mutant humans can also gain bioenergy by getting rid of their human traits, and then they can use the bioenergy they gained to acquire psionic powers, or what's described as human mutant powers. But they'll end up looking pretty weird as a result. Now, we already know what happens to a human if they're in contact with an animal, so I'm not gonna rehash that. So, the last thing I'm going to say is that if a human has not been in contact with another living being before being affected by the mutagen, there's a small chance their bodies are just going to molecularly break down, turning them into a mutant blob made of acidic goo, with only their internal organs remaining intact. And this is very strange, and it's literally only ever happened to Mutagen Man in the 2012 show, but I guess this could just be a very rare, unfortunate occurrence. Now, this is just about everything we know that happens when you are mutated, but we also know it's possible to be mutated twice. An example of these secondary mutations is like Dog Pound turning into Razar, or Leonardo in the Mutant Apocalypse. A secondary mutation can still turn you into a different animal though, assuming you've been in recent contact. Like in Urban Legends, Splinter gets mutated again and he turns into a bat after being injected with mutagen while being near some bats. Now, technically, being mutated twice is not the only way to have a second stage mutation, because sometimes the mutagen in someone's system can deteriorate and become unstable, leading to mutations that it caused also becoming unstable. This happened in the 1987 show, where they got second stage mutations that made them like bigger and stronger, but they lost like their speed, agility, and like mental security, right? And like Leonardo had armor and Donatello had like a weird eye thing, which was no doubt carryovers from the Next Mutation movie that was never made, but yeah. And they kept deteriorating too. And as a result, these deteriorating mutations caused them to like go berserk. You know, maybe that explains what's up with Leatherhead in the Mirage comics, since something was definitely wrong. Sometimes he'd be like scientist level intelligence, and other times he's like feral. And I know this is a popular theory, because that was the explanation in the quasi-canon TMNT comic, TMNT Origin, I think. It's also possible that the mutations getting out of control in the world of After the Bomb, in which every living thing mutates from one generation to the next, was a result of deteriorating mutations, like a hypermutation like Leonardo went through, but then again, it could just be a side effect of the bomb. Speaking of that bomb, I think it's important to mention all the times something was mutated with unstable mutagen or a mutagen experiment. Like in the IDW comics, Hun took the mutagen and gained super strength. But it's unclear if this was a regular result of mutagen or just the fact that they made the mutagen while trying to make a super soldier serum. In a 1987 show, Carter could transform in and out of his mutation due to being exposed to unstable mutagen. Vernon and Irma were also mutated with unstable mutagen. That show also had Tattoo be unmutated due to electricity, but it's likely that was just a failed mutagen experiment. Next up, in the 2012 show, Victor Falco produces a specific version of the mutagen that would not only mutate Dr. Rockwell, but also give him psychic powers, and later Falco perfected the serum, giving him the ability to read minds. In the 2012 show, Stockman accidentally modified the mutagen that mutated Karai, making it possible for her to shift back into her human form, and has also had the side effect of making her immune to the anti-mutagen. The Krang experimented with April, causing her to have powers, and the Krang perfected the mutagen using her DNA to make it terraform things to be like Dimension X. This show also shows that Super Shredder was a result of a new mutagen formula being too unstable, causing him to need to create a quote-unquote super mutagen to stabilize him. And his super mutagen somehow apparently removed all his emotional ties while increasing his strength. Don't ask me how that works. In Mutant Mayhem, Superfly gets mutated again with this mutation machine, but he gained all the attributes of all these like sea animals because the machine went off with him attached to it underwater. And in the 1987 show, Mutagen Man was a result of mutagen that didn't have Bindex 3. While in the IDW comics, Mutagen Man was a failed attempt at combining several different animal species into one mutant. And in the anime, the turtles transform using mutastones, which allowed them to transform and shrink and fuse and stuff. And these mutastones were created by neutrinos using mutagen, and they accidentally created these like stone spirits that were responsible for giving them powers in the stones. And then in the second episode, they got a second pair of mutastones that were created in Japan that gave them metal transformations using the spirits of animals. It's just anime stuff. Finally, let's talk about Retromutagen. In the 1987 show, they had a Retromutagen Ray, and they also had Compound X7, which proved to be temporary. And in the 2012 show, Donnie was able to use April's DNA to reverse engineer the mutagen to create Retromutagen. And in the Michael Bay movies, Donnie just re-engineers the ooze to have the opposite effect, instead of turning humans into animals, animals into humans. You get it. Finally, in The Secret of the Ooze, the professor used the contamination that made Taka and Razar dumber to create an anti-mutagen, and they state that it's made of dimethyl chloride, it must be heated to 338 Kelvin, and it has to be consumed to be effective, and carbon dioxide is needed to speed up the process. I'm not gonna lie, this may be like the most complicated anti-mutagen I've ever seen. But yeah, it varies. In the end, if you can find a way to reverse engineer the mutagen, you can probably create a retromutagen. But I should note that the retromutagen is still radioactive, so if you give this to like a regular human or animal, there's a chance it will mutate them. Like Pizza Face gained pizza flowers in the toy line after baking himself in a retromutagen oven. Bro stuck himself in a radioactive oven and got mutated, who would have guessed? And from there, we finally explained everything about how mutagen works. Like in a lot of detail. Like maybe too much detail. But have you ever questioned why it works? Well, in the Michael Bay movie, they state that inside every human there's a dormant gene which ties us to our animal ancestors, and it's as if that purple ooze has restored them to their rightful place in the animal kingdom. Now, this seems like nonsense until you remember that in the 2012 show, Mutagen evolved humans from monkeys.
It was Krang who used mutagen on the monkeys, turning them into lowly humans.
And at this point, you start thinking, wait, if monkeys were mutated into humans, does that mean there's a link between mutation and evolution? And then when you start thinking that, maybe all those animals gaining human-like features was actually just them evolving. And when you look at it like that, having the substance that forces evolution be able to tap into the genes of your ancient animal ancestors makes a lot more sense. That would also explain what was going on in Batman TMNT, where everyone was just turning into random animals, including T-Rexes. And it doesn't just stop there, however. In the RPG guide Transdimensional Turtles, there are many links between temporal energy and mutagen, like it's uncanny. For instance, extreme temporal energy leaking out of like a time travel device can mutate characters, right? On top of that, moving forward in time can result in a massive buildup of temporal energy, which can cause massive mutations. And moving backwards in time can leave the character deformed or devolved, and they'll gain bioenergy points. Also, I feel like I should mention, in the 1987 show, the Vortex Crystal is a crystal that has the ability to warp space and self, and yet that crystal caused the turtles to demutate. So I'm just going to cut to the chase and tell you that space and time are linked. So for now, just know that the mutagen can cause evolution or de-evolution, and it's heavily linked to temporal energy, which can control space-time. From here, I want to talk about the mutagen's link to magic. In Rise, the yokai were created from Empyrean, which is a term for a liquid mutagenic substance that poured out of the right eye of the Crying Titan. It's stated that Empyrean possesses great mystic powers and is the derivation of the mystic powers belonging to the yokai. And Draxum took a small amount of the Empyrean and used it to make his ooze, which brought mystic traits to ordinary creatures. So in short, there are mystic powers inherent in the mutagen. So let's talk about magic. Spell magic is stated to tap into the fabric of mystic energies and weave it into a useful focused force. And in the RPG guide, it states that becoming a wizard will cause 30 bioenergy points. And I should also note, they state that magic can be used to mutate creatures. We also find out that temporal magic exists and is mainly used by Time Lords, which makes sense since in the IDW comics we learn about the 10 cuts in the spirit world that let them do things like astral projection and time travel, right? But getting back on track, the RPG guide states becoming an apprentice Time Lord will cost 25 bioenergy points. And as you've probably noticed by now, the same bioenergy used in mutation is used in magic. In short, temporal energy, magic, and mutation are all linked through bioenergy. Now, there's a final piece in the puzzle which will make everything make sense, and that is Q&A. So you might be asking, what is Q&A? Well, first things first, in the IDW comics, Donatello takes a crystal made from the natural elements of the spirit world, and it determined that this crystal has the substance known as Q&A. And it's later revealed that this crystal is made from mutagen, or at least a different form of the same substance, like ice, liquid water, and steam. And that since this formation is actually just crystallized mutagen, that means mutagen is just a liquid containing Q&A. Then they go on to establish that Q&A is the temporal aspect of DNA and contains our memories, knowledge, emotions, spirits, souls, everything we ever were, are, and will be, meaning that this is likely the explanation as to why mutagen can evolve people or tap into the DNA of their ancestors. And since it's revealed that Q&A can also be transferred and transformed, that explains why the mutagen can combine animals and humans and such, and also why it transferred their memories, intelligence, abilities, etc. Continuing further, they clarify that Q&A is also the infinite energy that allows us to move through time. As such, Q&A can be used to control space and time, explaining the link to temporal energy. And if we're putting all the pieces together, that means this infinite energy is likely also called bioenergy. It all loops back around. Finally, they explain that space-time and gravity are linked, and that everything has gravity, but not just spatial gravity, but also psychic gravity called radiant gravity, and that magic is just using these gravitational forces to affect the soul. Which kinda makes sense, since we learned Q&A is kinda like lines of code in the environment itself. Kinda like how everything's made of protons and neutrons and stuff, so there's no real difference between like a person and the air surrounding them, because it's all just the same stuff arranged differently. Imagine that, but Q&A. So in short, magic is just radiant gravity being used to manipulate the Q&A in people and the environment. So in the end, the real secret of the ooze is that the mutagen is able to do what it does by tapping into the fundamental energy of the universe inherent in all things. Well, folks, that's all I got for you today. Be sure to smash that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.